I started out in ministry as a Methodist circuit rider. No, I didn't have a horse, and I didn't have saddlebags and with a hymnal and maybe a revolver in it. Nothing as glamorous or as romantic as that. This was the mid-50s. I was appointed to 3 churches, rural Alabama. Met a lot of warm and wonderful people. Ran into a few mean spirits in town, and met a lot of characters. It was a fantastic time in more ways than one. Isabella Methodist Church, Maplesville, Plantersville. Maplesville mayor of that little town, his father had been a circuit rider himself, a Methodist preacher who had 17 churches. I heard some great stories about that. But I met some real characters. Dr. Tom Martin, old-timey general practitioner, medical doctor from the typical country doctor, was one of them. I have gotten to know a number of people over the years who have either been alcoholics or have done things, and they have said from time to time, you know, I'm going to change my life. And I'm reminded of the saying that people can change, but they don't. We know it's possible, and yet we get locked into patterns. Dr. Martin comes to mind. Dr. Martin was about 6'8", weighed pretty close to 400 pounds. When I knew him, he had 19 children, 3 wives. All his wives had died. And Tom was a little confused as to who was God. Had an ego just about as big as his body was. Interesting man, not a bad man, but pretty well set in his ways and pretty well called the shots. And in those days, the country doctor was next to God. And Tom had a sister. Tom never came to church, or rarely came to church, but his sister was a regular attender. She was about the same age, pretty close in age to Tom. And Evie was just about half crazy. And I mean that probably clinically, if I could have tested her. One case in point I remember about Evie, she sang in the choir. One thing I remember about her is, the story was before I got there, that she woke up one night and heard her husband making out with a woman under the house. And so she got her rifle and went out in the middle of the night and shot at her husband and the woman he was making out with. I heard that story from Fonza Friday, who was my next door neighbor at the parsonage. He said that the bullet from the rifle hit his side of his house and woke him up. It was interesting. Nobody was hurt, of course, because Evie's husband had been dead for many, many years, and she was simply hallucinating. Well, Tom Martin had several heart attacks. He'd had a couple before I got there, and while I was there, he had a heart attack, put him in the hospital. So I went to visit him. I got off the elevator on the 3rd floor, and I could hear him bellowing all the way down the hall, you know, "Damn it, nurse, get in here and bring me in," and just causing a ruckus. So loud, bellowing, bombastic kind of a guy. I made myself my way into his room and was visiting with him, and he immediately became quiet, remorseful. Tears started to flow, and he said, "Oh, preacher," he said, "I've been a bad man. I've done some things I'm really ashamed of." And he started telling me about them. Well, I'm there as his pastor, but the stories he's telling me are really pretty interesting. And right in the middle of one of those stories of something that he had done in his past, Evie walks in. Now, Evie was just about as tall as Tom, but weighed about 125, 50 pounds, just thin as a rail. And Evie walks in and said, "Hi, brother, how you doing?" And he said, "Oh, Evie, I'm dying. I'm dying. If I get out of this, I'm going to turn over a new leaf." And Evie looked at him, crossed her arms, and said, "Yep, and you'll write on the other side just like you did on this one." And turned around and walked out. And Tom, for the first time since I had known him, was speechless. I think about that often when people say, "I can change," and they don't. I know it's possible, but too often we slide back into the same old patterns. When I think about those stories, about Tom particularly, I think about some of the stories that he was telling me. And then I realized I was there ostensibly as his pastor. But the more I think about it, the more I think that Evie was the one that really was his pastor. Dr. Tom Martin, one of the many characters that I've run across.